Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of My Boomer Buddies podcast, where we tell it like it was and is. Today, two great people. Terry Walsh is back with us. Always glad to see you, Terry.
Nice to be here.
And we've also got somebody that is a Boomer Buddy. He's on the logo. We finally got him on the show. He freed up his busy schedule for us. The one and only, my great friend, Joe Chesley. Joe, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Terry. Great to be here with you.
Good to see you.
Terry, Joe, we picked a pretty fun topic today. Brushes with fame. We've all had some have had more than others, but we're going to dip into a few of the stories that we have with our brushes with fame. And let's start with you, Terry. Give us a brush with fame that, comes to your mind first.
First one that comes to my mind is Linda Kelsey. She was an actress on the show Lou Grant. She was Billy the reporter with the red curly hair.
Yeah, I remember.
And she walked into Hennepin County Government Center where I was working, and I sold her marriage license.
Wow.
Nice.
And I was very pregnant at the time, and she signed a little piece of paper, congratulations on the new baby.
Well, that's a great one, Terry. Joe, I know that you have met some people in the day. Why don't you tell us about one? And how do
Sure.
you meet these people?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to tell you about two. It's a father and a son. I've been very fortunate in life to have the opportunity to meet a lot of different people. And the people I will talk about, I've been able to actually shake hands with them, give them a hug, fist pump, whatever, but a lot of different venues. But when I worked for General Motors, I was able to travel quite extensively. I've been around the world, but we had two individuals that we sponsored. One was but actually both of them were in NASCAR racing. Dale Earnhardt Sr. and Dale Earnhardt Jr. I was able to meet them twice, 2 years in a row out in Las Vegas when we brought in all of our sponsors. But it was just tremendous to be able to shake the hands of people that you followed. And for those folks that love NASCAR or auto racing, it's like a bucket list. It was great to meet both those guys. So, and tremendous people.
And what was the time frame on meeting them? Do you have an approximate year?
I worked for General Motors at two different times, so it would have been probably like, let's just say 96 or 97 was the first time that I met both senior and junior. And I would also just say that I was also the Grand Marshal at Daytona Speedway 7 days before Dale Sr. passed away. Instead of saying, gentlemen, start your engines, I said, drivers, start your engines, because there was two females
Oh,
in the race. But this was the ARCA race, which was 7 days before Dale Sr. passed away. And I happened to be able to get up close. So I have some pictures of Dale Sr. and Dale Jr., probably the last ones of them together, that I took with a Instamatic camera. So I'm
wow.
not a professional, but it was truly amazing. Again, just to see both of these guys and to meet them before. So
Well, I've got a few, not as many as probably you two, but right after my son Ricky was born, I think he was about 5 weeks old, at the Minneapolis Convention Center, they had the Home and Garden Show. And one of the contractors, I'm not going to say the name, but they hired a couple of celebrities to come down there and do meet and greets. I brought my son in a little front papoose, Ricky, and I brought my daughter Aspen and Sharon, and we met Eddie Haskell and Beaver Cleaver. So Jerry Mathers, Ken Osmond. So we met them, and they met thousands of people, and it's very memorable because, as you both know, I'm a big Leave It To Beaver fan. In fact, did an episode on my Boomer Buddies podcast with that as the subject. But that was pretty cool to actually meet them. How about you, Terry? Do you have another one?
Well, I also met Beaver Cleaver, and what a nice man, and very shy, very shy. But I did meet him at the airport. I am going to go with Mean Gene Okerlund.
Yes.
May,
Yeah.
maybe not known by everyone. I had a friend that dated someone in his family without going into too much information. So he had a cabin up by mine up in McGregor, and he was sitting in the bar one day. And so I went up to him and I said, aren't you like I couldn't remember it, and he's kind of puffing up, and I said, aren't aren't you Todd's dad? And he just burst out laughing. Such a good sense of humor kind
Yes.
of deflated him, and he had another job being a father, so that was good. He gave me a hug and I told him how I knew his son, and that was a good one. He's local, but he's was well known everywhere.
I too met him once. It was in his presence. He was very, very involved in professional wrestling, probably one of the greatest announcers, commentators. Well, he was in the AWA, which was local in the Twin Cities and regional in the Midwest. And he was fabulous. And one of the people that I worked with in the billboard business, Bob Graziger, he was involved with the Gagne family who owned and ran the AWA. Well, they brought him over to where I worked to do a photo shoot, and he was hilarious. And I won't say what he said, but it was a little blue, but he is a funny guy. And I imagine, Terry, that he loved it, thinking that you were going to, aren't you Gene Oakland? You said, aren't you Todd's dad? Now, Todd was a hockey player, right, at the U and all that, pretty good hockey player.
Yes.
And there's nothing better, Joe, and you know this too, to have the pride of being a father, to be recognized for your son. So that was cool. That was a cool story, Terry. Gene
Yes.
Okerlund, one of the greatest, known all over the world. WrestleMania. Joe, give us another one if you would.
Well, we'll stick to the bar scene since Terry brought that up.
Is
I
this a
was
common
out in,
theme for you both? A common
I
theme?
don't, I
Kind
don't
of.
think so,
No,
but
not anymore.
this next individual, I was again working with General Motors. I was out in Las Vegas. I went to a cigar bar. I love my cigars, and I went into this bar, and you could smoke in the bar. And there's a gentleman up at the bar, and it happened to be Bill Walton, who we just lost. He passed away a couple months, maybe a month ago, a couple months ago. But I started talking to him, and we were smoking. And Bill was a pretty good basketball player, but also in his later life, I guess he became a announcer and did a lot of basketball, etc. And very off the cuff guy, funny guy. But anyhow, he bought me a Cavassier, which is kind of a sweet drink or after dinner drink or whatever. But we sat there, and I was able to just listen to this guy talk, and it was fantastic. So that was really cool. I had a great time. And then I also want to mention that Rick and I went to college at the University of Minnesota Morris, played baseball together. Fellow Lake Conference, Rick Wyzetta, myself, I'm a Armstrong Moonwalker, as Rick calls it, the Falcons. But I was on an airplane and actually got an autograph for my son, Joey, from a pitcher that pitched for the New York Mets, but also pitched for the Twins, Jerry Koosman.
Yeah.
And up in Morris, Jerry, there is a bar called the Met Lounge, and it's all in orange and blue, like the New York Mets colors. And we would frequent that place, but when they remodeled, and I don't know if someone else bought them, I actually have a picture of Jerry Koosman that he remembered that was in that bar, and that's why I got the autograph for Joey. So I was in awe of Koosman, not just because we went to school there, but was a great left-handed pitcher.
Gary Kuzman was pretty good, and he was a local boy from Appleton, Minnesota. I've got
Yep.
another one, which was a brush with fame that was not intended. I worked for a billboard company, advertising, and it was kind of the end of the Mad. Remember that show? What was that show called, Joe,
Mad
Terry?
Men?
Admin.
Yes, it was kind of the end of
Love
the
the show.
Mad Men era. And we wore suits and ties to work. And the department that I was in was pretty cool. Dan Vikstrom, Boomer Buddy, who's been on the show many times, and I worked together. And our boss, Tom Cleese, we decided to go out to eat. And we did that quite often. And one of us mentioned that Raquel Welch was having a book signing at one of the shopping centers. And can't remember if it was B. Dalton or Barnes and Noble, but we decided to just pop in there and get a look at Raquel Welch and, go eat lunch. So we go there. It was a rainy day. We had on our London fog jackets and we get to the mall, which wasn't too far away. And we walk in and a huge crowd. It's like, oh man, maybe we can get a sight of her and then just head out. Next to us, the people just kind of parted. There's all these guys in trench coats walking through, and there's this little diminutive woman leading the way. Welch, it was Raquel Welch. So we just kind of walked in behind, and they thought we were part of the security detail. So we went right into her security and walked right up there, and we got a good look at her and listened to her talk a little bit, and then we were off to lunch because we had to get back. But that was our brush with fame with Raquel Welch. Tere, do you have another one for us?
Well, since Joe brought up baseball, I am going to go with Minnesota's own beloved, not an original Minnesotan, Tony Oliva. I was working at a place and he came in and he was walking right towards me, and I was just, I used to listen with my grandpa to Twins games on his little transistor radio. So this was a big thing for me. Then I went a couple days later. Well, he signed some autographs. He came back the next day with autographed pictures for my kids, and that was really nice. And then a few days later, I went in to the TV studio to do my TV show, and who comes walking in but Tony Oliva? And so I got to meet him again. We got to talk. He'll sign autographs till there's no one left. He gave me a baseball with his signed name on it, which I just gave to my grandson a couple years ago and told him to hang on to that. But what a congenial, nice man. Just, I think Minnesota just loves him. So that
They
was a
do.
fun one.
He's a great ambassador for the Minnesota Twins and Major League Baseball. And he recently was voted into the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame.
He
And he's made
was.
his home in the Bloomington area, I believe, for years and years. And my son Ricky was placing some ads at a gas station for the company I used to work for. And he ran into Tony Oliva. And Tony O said, in his broken English, he said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, I'm just placing ads and I have to take pictures to prove they're up." And he goes, "Really? I could do that." And he was thinking about trying to do that. And my sister ran into him somewhere too. So Terry, he is a great guy. He'll sign
He is
autographs. Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. Joe, how about another one from you, bud?
Since the Raquel Welch story came out, I worked for Dayton's department stores for 15 years, from 1980 to 1994. That's 14, maybe 14 and a half. We worked in the sub basement for all the receiving and marking. Our people the trucks would come in, offload the merchandise, and we'd have to ticket everything. Back before barcodes were invented in 1981. Wrigley Spearmint Gum was the first one, by the way, first product that had a barcode. Anyhow, this small young gal happened to be in the sub basement, or excuse me, there's a lower level at Dayton's where you could shop, but then one lower level there is the sub basement where we all worked. Paula Abdul was at Dayton's, and so I actually have her autograph on one of my business cards because that's all I had, and I gave it to my daughter Sarah, and so she has one of those autographs. But it was Paula Abdul in the Dayton store, so that was pretty cool. And then I also have to tell you that just share that music industry. I worked for a company called Pickwick International, and our mutual friend James Walsh knew the owners of Musicland/Pickwick, so we had many conversations. But I had a great job for a year and a half while I worked there, and one of them was to do an after show host, if you will, to make sure that the artists had a great time and we treated them right while they were in the Twin Cities for the concert. So the rock and roll group Journey, Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, and then also David Lee Roth from Van Halen, and our mutual friend Ron Tunby, who I worked with at Pickwick International, and I were a part of this team. And I have to tell you that we went to the old Registry Hotel, which was out by Metropolitan Stadium before they tore that down. And there was a cordoned off area, and we sat there and had cocktails with David Lee Roth until women came out of every which way, and there were security guards and whatever, and then that kind of ended that. But just the opportunity to be able to talk to these musicians. David Lee Roth is actually not a very tall person. I thought he was. He's actually very short, but I mean, he's out there. He has done many, many things. He likes to travel different places that like no man has ever been before. But Ron and I had a great time actually just sitting with him, loving music so much and listening to some of his stories.
Terry, do you have another one you want to share with us?
I met REO Speedwagon. My boss at the airline won a free, well, it was kind of a meet and greet, but they were in town to do a show for radio people. It was a private show, but he won a lunch with them and he couldn't go. So my coworker and I went down and we got to have lunch with them and take pictures with them, and nice guys, kind of shy. We sat at one table and they kind of all congregated at the table next to us. But once we got up and started talking, they kind of broke out of their shells a little bit. And I did see them at some concerts after that. That was pretty fun. And it's kind of cool when they look at you and wave at you. I'm sure they
Yeah,
didn't have I've seen you somewhere before, but it's fun.
that is
Yep.
pretty
Kevin
cool.
Cronin.
Kevin Cronin, Dave
And they're still
Amato.
going.
Yep.
They're still going.
They are.
This is my Boomer Buddies podcast, and we're here with Boomer Buddies Joe Chesley and Tere Walsh, and we're sharing our experiences meeting celebrities or brushing into them, brush with fame, if you will. And I've got another music one here. It didn't affect me, but Boomer Buddy Dan Vikstrom, this happened to him, and he shared it with me. He and I were at a local bar before we were going to head out to a concert at the Fine Line, if you remember that, the Fine Line Music Cafe, kind of a nice place to play. Perfect place to have your music heard. Well, we were at this bar and it was time to go and we were getting up to go. I couldn't find my wallet. My ticket was in there. And who were we going to see? Mick Taylor, who was doing a solo tour. He was the guitarist with the Rolling Stones, just a virtuoso guitarist, very melodic, beautiful blues background. I was frantic trying to find that. Well, it got to the point where Dan had to leave because he didn't want to miss the show. He's the biggest Rolling Stones fan in the world. So I unfortunately had to miss the show. I ended up leaving, and the wallet was found later. It was jammed in between some cushions or something. Anyway, so Dan went on to go to the show, and it was a great show. He had a table up front. And then after the show, he was at the bar ordering a beer, and all of a sudden, Mick Taylor's right next to him ordering a drink, and they, struck up a little conversation. Cool. And Dan went and sat down at the table to have his beer, and then Mick Taylor walks over and sits down. And I said, "How cool is that?" And he goes, "Well, don't make it such a big deal. There were a couple of cute women sitting there with me. I'm sure he didn't come here just to sit with me, more probably to meet and chat with the women." And I said, "Did you talk Stones at all?" And he said, "No, he was just on the road and he was probably more or less, just looking for some people to talk to." And the one thing he did say to Dan was that, Dan did say, "Hey, you going to tour with the Stones ever again?" He goes, "Probably." Well, it took 20 years, but they finally did again in 2014. He did some cameo appearances. So that was Dan's brush with fame with Mick Taylor, one of his, favorites of all time. Joel, let's jump to you. Let's get another story from you, please.
Thanks. I have a couple other music, since we're in the music venue here. Leonard Skinner is probably my second all-time favorite group. Yes, being my first favorite group, very prog rockers, but Leonard Skinner, Aerosmith, Rolling Stones. I met Alan Collins from Leonard Skinner, and this is unfortunately after he had a bad accident. This is after their plane crash, so this would have been 1980, and he was in a wheelchair. And I met him at Met Stadium, which was kind of cool. Talked to him just very briefly. Also at the State, no, it wasn't the State Theater, the Armory. I don't know if it was Rossington Collins Band, but Billy Powell. I was able to meet him, did kind of a high five as he was walking out after the show was over with. And then through General Motors, I was in Mexico, and there was an all-star band that we hired, and it was different people from Journey, Santana, Leonard Skinner, Kansas, people that had actually played in those bands. And Randall Hall from Leonard Skinner was there. So I had a chance to listen to him and talk to him a lot. And then I would also say this is that my all-time favorite, as I mentioned, is Yes. A number of years, Chris Squire was the bass player and one of the longest standing members in the various iterations of Yes. And I was able to go to Mystic Lake and do a meet and greet, and I was with my son Joey, so we have the photos and the receipts of that. It was so fantastic. But I had a chance to see my musical hero, Chris Squire, Steve Howe, Alan White. Alan's deceased right now as well. It was just phenomenal. I'm so grateful I was able to at least meet somebody that you have looked up to and enjoyed their music. So it was something that's been fantastic for me. So fun to share that.
That's awesome. Yeah, Yes is one of your favorites for sure. But here's Yes.
Absolutely. Listen to that bass.
Yeah, it's a little snippet that
That
I've
was
got.
awesome, Rick. Thank you.
Knowing you're going to be on the show, I threw that in there. But Kansas, you like progressive rock. I like the Moody Blues. There's another progressive rock band with somebody that was pretty amazing. And Tere, that's your late great husband, James Walsh of the band Gypsy. That's a brush
Yeah.
with fame for Joe and I. And for you, you were married to him. So how did
I
you meet?
was.
I want to know that.
He played with a local band part-time. One of the people in the band was Gypsy's Bobby Jones. And then another person from the band said, I've got someone I want you to meet, and kind of dragged me over. I knew he had told me that James Walsh was coming, and he dragged me over. I was very, very nervous. And he just wanted to keep talking after nice to meet you. We developed a friendship and then a really special bond, and then we got married and lived happily ever after for a little while.
And Joe, what is your brush with fame with James? I have to thank you because of you. I got to know James as well. But how did that start?
Well, I golf up at Greenhaven, up in Anoka, Minnesota, and I really met James's brother, John Walsh. Didn't know him really well, had golfed with him. James actually came up to, it was Izades up on, um, what is that big lake up there?
Mille Lacs.
Thank you. I lived outside of Minnesota for 25 years, even though it's the biggest lake probably in Minnesota. I forget it. But James was up there, he had dinner with us, and I happened to sit down and just talk with him, and it was fantastic. We developed a. I mean, he listens. He listens to what you're saying, and it was great. I had a great conversation. He goes, "Hey, come on out to the car." So go out to his car, and he had a Gypsy 50th anniversary T-shirt that he gave me, and it was great. And then through the next year or so, Rick obviously has been able to meet James, and James talks about Rick all the time at the concerts. It's so fun, and James is so humorous. I just love his demeanor was great. After a song, he would just look around and start talking to the audience and just having a great time. And I know the band members loved him. James loved them as well. He really, as Rick mentioned, has helped Rick and myself out with some really down to earth conversations just about life. I'll always be forever grateful. And I also have with me right now, this is James's head cover. I am the proud recipient of this head cover. It just means an awful lot to me to be able to have a piece of James right here with me. So that's my James, just a wonderful, wonderful man. I also want to just mention this too, as I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday that I played golf with. James actually went on a golf trip and they were up north someplace, and a lot of the guys, after they're done playing golf, they're having a few beers and they're at a karaoke bar. James just sat back and just watched everybody and enjoyed it. And finally, they were able to get James to go up and do a song, and it blew everybody away. And James actually said to the guy running the machine, he said, like, put it in C or whatever. And that, again, I don't know my music in terms of the different chords and whatever, but I guess he just blew everybody away. James was very, very modest. He wouldn't try to take the limelight. He was just sitting back, but he went up there and he just blew everybody away. His voice is just magnificent. I know we all miss James the Owl Walsh.
He took us two stray dogs and brought us in and took care of us for a little while. We lost James, Tere, in March of last year. You've been doing your best to cope and everything, and I know you miss him terribly. And he was supposed to be part of the Boomer Buddies podcast. He was going to be one of the Boomer Buddies. And you have come in and stepped in and done a great job. We're very grateful that you've been on so many episodes and a wonderful person. And we're blessed to know you through James. That's probably the greatest brush with fame. And maybe this is a good place to end this episode. And there's a limited edition poster that Tere has. I'll throw it up here, and I'll put the email address that you can get information on getting a piece of James as well. If you go ahead verbally and say your email address, Tere, that'd be great.
It is Stew, STEW 854 at hotmail.com.
James Walsh, then and now. Well, my Boomer Buddies podcast, Joe, it's good to finally get you on here. There's a lot of things we can talk about Boomer wise. We have so many experiences through the years. Tere, there's things we can't say on here. Well, we could, but we have to do a different separate channel. He's a beloved friend, Joe Chesley. So glad that he's been part of my life all these years. And Tere, we're glad that you are part of our lives as well. Look forward to seeing you soon. September, we're going to go see Randy Keeley's band,
Expedition,
at the Chanhassen Dinner Theater. So if you want to see a great band, go see him. So brushes with fame. We got a lot more we can cover probably in another episode. Any final words, Tere?
You guys have been an important part of my life, and I'm so honored that you've asked me to do your podcast with you. I know you guys have worked hard on it. I know James loved you both and made some gestures and things to you when you were sick or things weren't going so well. And yeah, he was that kind of person.
Joe, how about you, bud?
I love both of you. I think it's uncanny, Rick. Rick's had this vision and a dream to do a podcast. I'm glad that he is certainly doing it. Both Rick and I at University of Minnesota Morris kind of found our niche in the communications field with an instructor, Richard Ilka. That bonded us even closer. We've done a lot of things together related to this type of activity. Both love sports, both love music, but I'm here to help support and continue going on with what your dream is on this. So again, love both of you, and I really appreciate being on the air with you guys.
Hey, if you've liked this episode, we talk about TV shows, we talk about music, we talk about movies, we talk about anything boomer related. You don't have to be a boomer to watch this show. It's just got a boomer slant. We've seen so many things in our lifetime, and this is where we talk about it. If you have ideas for us, just send us a comment on YouTube. Just below, send a comment of any kind of content you want to hear from us. We may not be experts on everything, but we have a knowledge about it. And we'll get people on too that are experts. So we're going to wrap this up for my Boomer Buddies podcast. Joe Chesley, Tere Walsh, I'm Rick Reed. Until next time, we'll see you
around the block.
Love it.
If you enjoy this podcast and are viewing on YouTube, please like, hit the subscribe button on your screen, and share it with your friends, and feel free to comment below. You can also hear us on Spotify and Buzzsprout. Feel free to email comments to myboomerbuddies4@gmail.com.